Let no one deny that we are patriots. We love our country. We hold dear the values upon which our nation was founded. And we are distressed at what our president, our administration, and our Congress are doing to and in the name of our nation. Blind faith in bad leaders is not patriotism.
Okay, and welcome to Democracy Interactive Radio for January 8th, 2012. My name is Daryl, and that was the voice of our guest today. We'll be bringing him on in just a moment. But before we bring him on, I just wanted to say that we will go to calls at the bottom of the hour, but I would ask that you wait until about 15 minutes or so into the show before you call in, or else you'll be holding for a very long time. So we don't want to keep you on hold for very long. So we just ask that you wait until about 15 minutes or so into the show to call in. Okay, our guest today is the former two-term mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah, who came to national attention because of his outspoken challenge to the way we relied into war in Iraq. He went on to serve as the executive director of High Road for Human Rights, and he's been the recipient of many awards from the Sierra Club, Morehouse University, the EPA, and Progressive Democrats of America, among others. He's now running for president of the United States on the newly formed Justice Party, and it's a great pleasure to be joined today by Rocky Anderson.
Well, thank you very much, Daryl. It's great to be with you again.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. We love having you on the show, and especially now that you're running for president. And before we talk about your presidential run, I wanted to go back a bit, and it looks like in everything that we read about your career, from the work you've done to the name of the party you've just been a part of creating, it's clear that justice is a driving force in your life. Where does that passion for justice come from?
Well, I really think all the way back to my childhood. Somehow it was impressed upon me. I don't know if it was in my family. I had really great parents that cared a great deal about other people, and having really fantastic teachers that helped pass on these values. But along the way, I think that I became very sensitive to the fact that there were a lot of people who didn't have a fair shot in life, who weren't born in good circumstances, who weren't provided a lot of opportunities, and that those of us who did have those opportunities really didn't have some kind of entitlement to them. Rather, I think that the opportunities we have creates a duty and as well a great opportunity to do what we can to lend a helping hand to those who are vulnerable, who are disenfranchised, who haven't had a fair shot in life.
Right. So can you recall a particular moment that stood out to you as a great injustice that you felt needed to be corrected?
Well, probably all through my life. Certainly during my very formative years in high school, the Vietnam War was raging. This country had stood by and allowed our presidents, again, to lie us into a very tragic war. It was one of the most tragic episodes, I think, in world history, not just our nation's history, but world history. Right. And it just has always seemed to me that at moments like that, every one of us, when this is being done in our name and by our nation, it's our responsibility to stand up. It occurred to me, and you see this throughout life really, that there are three categories of people. First, there are the perpetrators, those who actively engage in wrongdoing. Then there is the huge category, vast majority of people who are the bystanders, those who accommodate, who turn a blind eye, who say, oh, it's none of my business, or I don't have the power to do anything, or if I do something, it might impact my job or my relationships. And so they allow the wrongdoing to take place without standing up against it. And then there is a category of those who stand up against the wrongdoing, the upstanders. And I think that's something that we all should strive to be, because during this life on this earth, I think all of us should want to be able to look back and say, when we saw something wrong that was being done, we took action, we stood up, we thought it through, we became educated, and that goes to the other aspect of this, of course, and that is that we have a duty to find out what's happening. If there's wrongdoing going on, we can't just go through life in ignorant bliss when, if we were finding out about what was happening in the world and doing something about it, we could make a huge difference. And that's the ultimate point here, I think, is that every one of us can make a huge difference. And I know sometimes that sounds trite, but it's absolutely true. In our own way. Not every one of us have to run for office. Not every one of us have to hold some formal leadership position or have a title. But every one of us, in our families, in our church groups, in our schools, with our associates at work, we all can provide our own form of leadership and help turn things around in our country. And what we've seen during this last decade has been very much just the opposite of that, I think. And it's been something that is very puzzling to me, and that is the sense of lethargy, the way that people have maybe been apprised of what's going on, but not really rising up to do anything about it. We invaded and occupied a Muslim country, creating so much hatred and resentment around the Muslim world, and it posed absolutely no threat of harm to the United States. It became clear that our president and his administration had lied to us. It wasn't just that they were mistaken, and that's a myth that we need to get beyond. They were provided the intelligence that there were no weapons of mass destruction. They were provided the intelligence that Saddam Hussein was not trying to build up a nuclear capability. And yet we were being told that repeatedly, and after it became so abundantly clear that we had been lied to, it's like this country was anesthetized. A few people would get together at a few demonstrations. You heard my speech there at the beginning of your program at one of the big demonstrations we held here in Salt Lake City. But we weren't out in the streets. We weren't shutting down cities. We weren't making it politically impossible for those who had voted to take us to war, to give the president a blank check to take us to war, completely at odds with the war power clause of the Constitution. We didn't make it clear that they would never again serve in public office. Instead, most of those incumbents were reelected. One of those people who voted for that blank check for President Bush to take us to war without even reading the confidential documents that were available to her that would have disclosed that the intelligence community was very split on these issues and that the president was lying to us about the state of knowledge in the intelligence community. She's now serving as our Secretary of State. It's just mind-blowing to me that there isn't some accountability in this country when there are such enormous issues, life and death issues that are going to have ramifications for generations to come, very negative ramifications for our nation, for our children and later generations.
Right. Now, I guess this is all part of why you're running, you decided to run for president. why do you think now is the time to challenge the two-party system that we have?
I think the perfect storm is brewing when it comes to entirely changing the system. This should no longer be a matter of simply replacing those who are playing by the rules of the game that has become so corrupt in Washington, with corporate money calling the shots at the great detriment of the public interest. And we see that in every major public policy failure of our government, that the public interest has been betrayed because of the corrupting influence of that money. So there certainly is a greater knowledge among people in this country, not only of that fact in the abstract, but that it translates into horrendous damage for the people of this country, the economic losses. All anybody has to do is look at their pension or their 401k plan and see how their economic security has been so negatively impacted by the economic crimes, the financial fraud committed by Wall Street bankers and others. And it was all accommodated by a Congress, by an administration, by several administrations, frankly. Everything from the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act to deregulation, backing away from reserve requirements, what Alan Greenspan so shamelessly did when he was at the Fed. And now we see a situation where it's clear to everybody that there were massive financial crimes, these frauds that were committed that led to the economic upheaval in this country and that's impacted people around the world. And there hasn't been one person brought to justice for those crimes. And you wonder why. Well, all you have to do is follow the money, as usual.
Right. There's a film out, and I don't know if you've seen a documentary film out called Inside Job about the financial crisis of 2008. And one of the people in the film who runs a consumer advocacy group says, we have a Wall Street government today.
That's absolutely right. And by the way, I understand it's a great film, and it's high on my list.
Yeah, it won the Academy Award a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And I really recommend books like Matt Taibbi's Griftopia. It's a scathing indictment. He does such a great job of explaining these financial crimes and even getting down to the kinds of instruments that were used and things like Alan Greenspan's Ayn Randian philosophy that sort of led him to this deregulation mania, and then Congress, the administration's going along with this insanity. But Wall Street contributed more money to President Obama's last campaign than it's contributed ever to anybody's campaign. And then he surrounds himself with people from Goldman Sachs, all the Wall Street buddies that have been in this for decades, leading to this disaster. No prosecutions by his administration. It really has become a government that's bought and paid for. Right. And the corporate sector owns Congress. It owns the White House. So what we're talking about here is not just simply moving people around, applying the rules that have developed, this corruption, this disease system that we have, but changing the system, making certain that we get good campaign finance reforms in place, even if it takes a constitutional amendment. That can be done in this country. The people of this country want to see that happen, but you need leadership. You need somebody going out and making the case, motivating people, getting people to understand that this really can happen. I mean, you look at presidents we've had that have provided strong leadership. Look at Franklin Delano Roosevelt. His Social Security was such a foreign kind of idea to people. The idea that we all would pitch in and help those in their later years to provide security so people weren't going in to their last years with total financial insecurity, and that was the situation then. The vast majority of the elderly were impoverished during those times. We're a better country than that. And we need a president who can convey that. This has been the most timid president, providing the worst leadership, following probably the best campaign in the history of this country. There was such tremendous hope, and it wasn't, I think, well, in large part it was because he wasn't George Bush. That's why he got the Nobel Prize. He didn't earn the Nobel Peace Prize. Mm-hmm. It's just simply that he wasn't President Bush, and everybody had great hope for that change that was promised. Well, that turned out to be flim-flam. It was great public relations that got him elected, but the same people are being served. People in the White House, people in Congress are simply the lapdogs of those with the money that are able to pull all the strings. And so when you asked, why is this the time for a third party, it's because the people of this country now get it. They understand how they're so adversely impacted. And they want to see these changes come about. They want to be told the truth. I'm a truth teller. I get, sometimes it's not all that easy at the moment, but in the long run, people respect it. People see that they've got somebody. Whenever we have leaders who tell us the truth, they're in the long run respected. And the truth wields tremendous power. When people can listen to somebody and say, this person isn't one who just tells us what we want to hear, like what we've seen in the Republican primary debates. It's just amazing how these people can shift their script according to what they think the polls are saying at the moment. And it's all about political opportunism. But people of this country are better than that. They recognize the truth. And so the polls show that there is overwhelming support by people of all political stripes for a major alternative party. There are vast numbers.
So what would you say to Democrats rank and file Democrats who think, you're right, but they're afraid to abandon the president for fear of a Republican president?
That's a great question. And you put it in exactly the right terms. They're driven by fear. They would re-elect a president who has betrayed so many fundamental values that the Democratic Party has always stood up for in order to elect the lesser of two evils, rather than standing up and saying, let's get together as a people. Let's create this grassroots momentum. Let's organize, like we've seen people do around the world that have been putting their lives on the line to overthrow the dictatorships under which they're living. Mm-hmm. We can do the same in this country. We can overthrow the dictatorship of corrupt money if we will all simply envision that and then act on it. And I think that, again, we're better than that. We're better than being driven simply by fear. And, think about it. We really are so incapable of drawing the line in this country that Democrats would vote for somebody that includes U.S. citizens on assassination lists, who asks for, and I think there's real misunderstanding about this, Congress in the Military Authorization Act just passed, gives the president the power to point to anybody and have them indefinitely detained without charges, without legal representation, without a trial. Absolutely counter to the Due Process Clause of the Constitution, which prohibits the government ever from taking one's life, liberty, or property without due process. It is the very definition of tyranny. Mm-hmm. And he asked for it. It wasn't that Congress just on their own came up with this idea and said, let's pass this bill giving the president this power. And when the president said initially that he was going to veto it, I knew that there was no way he was going to veto it because he actually asked for those powers in 2009.
Right, as Rachel Maddow pointed out on a program.
Exactly. And I've posted that a number of times. It was an excellent program by Rachel Maddow, and anybody can see that. It's on YouTube. Just look at it. Just check out Rachel Maddow, Indefinite Detention, and you'll see the president out of one side of his mouth talking, as she puts it, poetically about the rule of law, and then calling for legal authority for the president to have the power to indefinitely detain people. And you have to wonder, again, when you talk about this lethargy and complacency in this country, when it was proposed in Britain that the government be able to indefinitely detain people for a number of days, I don't remember how many it was, all hell broke loose. The country, there was no way they were going to allow that, so they brought it down to a much, much shorter period of time. Now what do we have? We have indefinite. It could be up to a person's lifetime, indefinite detention. It is absolutely un-American. It's subversive to our nation's values. It's subversive to our Constitution.
And one of the things that I point out to people who, I've been a Democrat my entire voting life, and one of the things I always point out to people is that when they talk about the fear of a third party, and I've seen this has been going back for years, one of the things I point out is the past two Democratic presidents have been responsible for NAFTA, GATT, the Media Consolidation Act, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, overruling the EPA, and now the indefinite detention of American citizens. And, that right there, it shows the insanity of what's become the Democratic Party.
This was not our fathers or our grandfathers' Democratic Party.
No.
And people, how liberating would that be for people to say, okay, now we get it. This party is just, it's playing the same game that the Republicans play. Sure, there are differences, and Fox will make it look like they're butting heads over these issues, and it somehow really differentiates them. No, they both sustain and are sustained by this corrupt system that has altered our government, and it has become truly a plutocracy. There's nothing democratic about our system. It is a government that is controlled and run by the wealthy.
Right. Well, Rocky, let me give the number for people who want to call in. The number is 347-205-9119. That's 347-205-9119. We'll be taking your calls, and we would just ask if you keep your comments as brief as possible so we can get as many callers in as we possibly can in the time we have. Rocky, I want to get your take on how you would approach some issues as president that are crucial to our nation. And one of those issues is health care. How would you approach our health care system as president?
I would pursue universal health care coverage for every citizen of this country, as does every other single nation in the industrialized world. We are so out of whack. Can you imagine if this were a corporation and you were a shareholder and the annual report came back and said, well, our costs are more than double the average of the rest of our competitors, that is all the other nations in the industrialized world. Our outcomes are mediocre at best, and we don't provide health care for some 50 million people. Even under the Obama plan, if it's fully implemented, there would still be 23 million people without health care coverage in this country, whereas all of our competitors cover everybody.
Right.
So let's see. Our competitors cover everybody, their costs are much lower, and their outcomes on the whole are better. You would get rid of every one of the members of your board of directors. You would get rid of every one of the officers of your company. You would have a major management overhaul. if you wanted to compare favorably to your competitors.
Right.
And I'm not saying these nations are competitors necessarily. It's just that they are cleaning our clock when it comes to their health care services. And it's absolutely shameful. And once again, it's because of the corrupting influence of the insurance industry on our government, pure and simple. And everybody knows it. And I just have to wonder, why do we put up with this? Why do we put up with ever-increasing premiums? Why do we put up with lack of coverage? These insurance companies have done everything they can to take in as much in premiums, paying out huge salaries and bonuses, plus dividends to their stockholders. And we keep getting shafted. Who really has, other than members of Congress maybe, or the 1%, who really feels secure in terms of their health care coverage? It's something that hangs over every one of us every day of our lives. That doesn't happen in other nations. I've got a couple of great friends who've been friends since 1974 when they were in medical school. Now one of them's head of oncology at the University of Regensburg. Another one's a family practice doctor in Olpa, Germany. They can't believe it when I tell them how our medical system works, what it takes to get an insurance policy, how much it costs, what you have to go through, the paperwork, the waste. 20% of what we call our health care dollars goes into administration, paperwork, the bonuses, the outrageous salaries, the marketing. There's not one other nation in the entire industrialized world, not one, that depends upon for-profit insurance companies to provide essential health care services. So I would make that case. I would be aggressive about it. Our president basically, you wondered, was he just missing in action? He might have been having some closed-door meetings. I don't know. I think probably with the insurance industry.
Yeah, with the pharmaceutical industry.
And the pharmaceutical companies. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. Well, I want to ask you about, Thomas Frank, the gentleman that wrote What's the Matter with Kansas, wrote a great book about 4 years ago called The Wrecking Crew, which is about the modern Republican Party and their obsession with actually not making government work so that we can privatize, so that they can privatize all of these functions that government used to do. They used to be in the public good. How would you deal with these ideological Republicans?
Well, I would go around them and make the case to the American people, because the American people are smarter than this. Once they're given the facts, once the case is made to them, and again, when we've seen strong presidents who know how to provide leadership, who know how to communicate, when they go to the people, they can make things happen. Even third-party candidates. If you read the latest book by Thomas Friedman, he's joined by Michael Mandelbaum. It's called That Used to Be Us.
That Used to Be Us,
They make a very strong case for a third party doing exactly what we're doing in the Justice Party, doing exactly what I'm doing in my campaign, going out, telling the people the truth, calling out the lies of the Democratic and Republican parties, and creating a sense in this country that this can be done. And it's not necessarily to win the race, but and it's not just to raise the dialogue, to create the discussion, but to move the people of this country so that there is the political pressure to achieve these things, to really change our system, to get the corrupting influence of money out of our system. And as they point out, Teddy Roosevelt, when he ran, he said one time that he was healthy as a bull moose, so they started calling it the Bull Moose Party, but it was actually the Progressive Party. Much of his platform in that race was ultimately implemented by the administration that prevailed in that race. The same thing happened when Ross Perot brought up during his first third-party candidacy about the deficit. Nobody was talking about balanced budgets. Nobody was talking about the damage that our accumulated debt and interest burden has on our country and on the future until Ross Perot got involved. And because he did, there became a sense in this country that we need to get our fiscal house in order, and it led to President Clinton, in his last several years in office, developing a budget that brought about a major surplus. Now, President Bush, of course, he demolished that, and with the Bush tax cuts and the wars. Those two things are why we're in the disastrous situation we're in now. Nobody can really contest that. We know how devastating this has been, but we have a president. Let me just finish on that note.
Okay.
We have a president now, a Democratic president, who won't draw the line in the sand and say there is no way we're going to continue these Bush tax cuts. And it's because of the Democrats, frankly. There was Democratic support in Congress for those Bush tax cuts, and they all colluded in this. These two parties have brought us to this disastrous situation. You can't point the finger at just one of them. It's both of these parties, and they need to be held to account.
Right. Yeah, there was someone at one of the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations in Des Moines, and I love this quote from this person. He said, "This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. It's about the whole system being against us." And I think that pretty much sums up, where we are. But, Rocky, we have a caller from Fort Worth, Texas, Kit, who wanted to ask you a question.
Great.
Hi, Kit. You there?
Hi, Daryl. Good morning, Daryl and Mary Anderson.
Hi, Kit.
I spent some time in my life as a teacher, and I realize this is a little off topic you've been on, but I think it's one of the more crucial situations we're facing right now. And as president, how would you see yourself leading a reformation of American education? Now, I'm not talking about charter schools, because I've studied this quite a bit, and without the infusion of outside capital investors, charter schools fail. So I'm talking about public education as we have it. How do we improve it? What can you do as a president to guide us in a better direction?
Okay, thank you.
Well, this is perhaps the most important issue we're facing, at least in the short term, because our educational system is failing this nation. It's failing our children. And there are a lot of people working really hard, but it's a system that isn't working. And there are two major things, well, more than two, but two that I'd like to talk about. First of all, we need to provide opportunities for very enriched preschool programs for our kids. Instead of kids coming in at the kindergarten or first grade level, and we're always trying to catch up if they haven't been exposed to books, if there hasn't been the physiological brain development that's possible during those early years, you're never really going to catch up, and including the social skills that are taught in these preschool programs. I worked for 15 years as a volunteer member of the board of directors with the school here in Salt Lake City. All economically disadvantaged students. And once we put in place this preschool program, starting at birth, taking teachers into the home, working with the parents, after that, and these kids coming through the program, kindergarten through third grade, and then into the public schools, their test scores have skyrocketed. They are among the very, very best when compared with any other schools in this area on things like language development. You can do that. And then we need to, just as earlier generations committed to educating our young people and providing free secondary education, we need to commit as a nation to provide higher educational opportunities for everybody capable of doing the job. And then perhaps, because I think people put more value on something that they have to work for, and there could be a lot of good payback to society if we provided free higher education and then had a sort of community service payback, where there was a commitment that if students got free tuition, that they would work in communities. They'd put their education to good use for the benefit of all. But if we're going to remain competitive, and we've lost our competitive edge in comparison to so many other nations, if we're going to get that competitive edge back, we have got to make a massive commitment to education. And that also includes accountability for teachers and administrators. And there are ways to do that respectfully, ways to do that lift everyone in the process. And those are some of the things that I think the American people would love to see happen, and they're absolutely affordable. In fact, those investments, if we don't make them, I just have to say we can't afford not to do these things, and the future really is at risk.
Right. Okay, Kit?
I of course, I agree with that, but I also would like to know how you can persuade the country, because this is a sociological change in the way we think about education. Mm-hmm. And how do you go about persuading the country, and more importantly, the Congress, to work with you to finance changes in education?
Right. Thanks, Kit.
Thank you, Kit. And just very briefly, again, it's about communicating the American public and getting the country behind you. You know, when President Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon, it inspired people. People were excited. After Sputnik, we committed to greater educational opportunities and focus, especially in the sciences. And we accomplished that. It was a matter of great pride for this country. You don't see any of that now, as so many other nations' students are outscoring our students, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any end to it unless we make these major changes. We cannot afford not to make those investments.
And I think Tom Friedman makes that point in the book you mentioned, That Used to Be Us. You know, he talks a lot
exactly
about that issue. Thanks, Kit. And we're going to go to Will in Chicago. Will, are you there?
Good. Yes, good morning, Darrell and Anderson. My question concerns other candidates in the Justice Party. Are there any plans for Justice Party candidates to run at either the Senate level Congress or for a local office? And, of course, I know there will be a VP candidate coming up. One thing that, in looking at the emergence of the Justice Party, is that I'm reminded that when the GOP suffered a historic defeat in 1964, the Goldwater activists, instead of just giving up and seeing themselves doomed, as many of the pundits claimed, went to work getting elected on local school boards, town councils, city councils, and working their way up to state office and higher.
Right. That's a good question. Will.
Yeah, that is a great question, a very good point. We just barely got off the ground. We only came together and formed the Justice Party a few weeks ago, and it was right after that I announced my candidacy for the Justice Party's nomination. But we're already hearing from people that they're interested in running on the Justice Party ticket. And the real challenge right now is to get on the ballots, to get the party on so that others can run. My preference is not just to run under my name, even if they'll allow me to identify the party, if it's just me as the only candidate. I really hope that we can bring other people into this. And certainly the time frame is very short now, but in 4 years, I anticipate we'll have dozens, if not hundreds, of people running for municipal, state, and federal offices under the Justice Party banner.
Right. So even if, and one of the things that's been interesting, in following your run for president is actually looking at how the Democrats and Republicans in a lot of these states have rigged the system against any other party or any other candidates running for office.
Well, that's what duopolies do. They want to maintain all the power for themselves, all the perquisites, And so these two parties in many of the states have made it virtually impossible. They've slammed the door on any alternative parties. California, for instance, had a January 2nd deadline. Now, we just announced this party's formation in December. There's no reason for a January 2nd deadline to get 1,030,000 signatures on a petition, or 103,000 people registered as Justice Party members. It's absolutely undemocratic, anti-democratic to deny people the choice. And if people really care about our democracy, we would all be demanding that those restrictions. So you don't want 100 people on the ballot. You don't want just everybody that can sign a form to be on. But these requirements are absolutely absurd and really deny us any opportunity in some states to challenge the major two parties. But the same thing happens in the debates, in the presidential debates. I know a lot of people think the Presidential Debate Commission is somehow independent and they've got that official-looking seal. I was surprised to learn about a year ago. I read this excellent book called No Debate. Ralph Nader actually brought it to my attention. And it points out that the Presidential Debate Commission was a sole creation of the Republican and Democratic parties, and they are there to do the bidding of the major candidates of those two parties. So if they want to keep somebody off, which of course one or the other always does, then there's nobody else on stage with them. They have a monopoly on the debates. And it's something that is, I think, again, totally contrary to the public interest. The Presidential Debate Commission hijacked those debates away from the League of Women Voters, who used to do this in a very independent, open fashion. They would include third parties. They would choose the moderators and the format. Now the candidates get their representatives together. They work out a memorandum of understanding, lay out everything, including the dates, the format, how long responses are going to be, even getting down those kinds of details. And then they hand it over to the Presidential Debate Commission, and they go off and execute for those two candidates what they have agreed upon.
Right. Rocky, Will had a follow-up question to you. Will, are you there?
Right. Yes. Quick question, and it's tied into the first. What are some of the ways that people can support the Justice Party on a local level? Because there's a very old political saying, I don't know who came up with it, that victory on Election Day is a ground game in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's right. First of all, let me mention the websites.
Right.
My website is voterocky.org, and I really encourage people, please go to that. Again, this has been done under a very short time frame, but we've got some good information. More is getting added almost daily there. And I'm limiting contributions to $100 per person. And so I'm asking everybody, if you want to see a people's movement, you want to see a grassroots political effort to overthrow the dictatorship of corrupt money, that means all of us doing our share. So please go to that website and help out as you can. The Justice Party website is justicepartyusa.org, and they're going to be revamping that website as well. They got the one up they have now in just a matter of days. And all this has been on a very short time frame, but please go to that. And then also, we have a map on my website. Please form a team. Upload your information, your profile. Show that we have support in every state. And then in those states where we are organizing a ballot access effort, and that's in virtually all of the states now, let us or the party know that you're willing to help with that battle in your state. Did you say you're from Illinois, by the way?
Yes, he's from Chicago.
Okay. Lenny Brody is from Chicago, Illinois. He used to be with Progressive Democrats of America, and he was on the founding steering committee. He's doing a lot of good work, and he's the person in charge, actually, of ballot access. So if those in the Illinois area can let us know that they're interested, we'll definitely follow up. We'll follow up with anybody anywhere in the country. But it really is going to take this massive effort at the grassroots to help out getting these signatures and getting us on the ballots in every state. And then I also encourage those in states where we get on the ballot to consider running for office. And again, I mean, from the school board level, city council, Congress, statewide offices, if we can have this kind of a presence, this party in 4 years is going to be the major political force in this country. I don't think there's any question about it. It is catching on like wildfire, and it's because people recognize the truth. This is a spark that people recognize, and it's going to grow and grow all over the country. And I'm very, very encouraged by it. So thank you for your interest, and I just urge everybody, please let the party know. And also, it does take money, and we're trying to equalize this, make it accessible for everybody. Please help out as you can in the campaign.
That brings up a question. I worked as a volunteer in the Dean campaign, and that campaign was very much funded by small donors. People think that that small donors can't raise enough money. That campaign raised $15 million in 1 quarter from people giving less than $75, making less than $75 donations. So if enough of us do it, and I think the number of people that did that, it was maybe 150,000 donors. Wasn't even a million donors.
This absolutely can be done, and Tom Friedman made that point not only in that book we were just referring to, but in some op-ed pieces as well. That if we get enough people making smaller donations, we can turn the tide in this country. This can be done, especially with the advent of social media. I mean, look at the people in Egypt. They put their lives on the line, organizing through social media, coming out, making their commitments. They were able to overthrow their dictatorship and change the course of their nation's history. We can do the same thing in this country if only we recognize that this can be done and we have the will to do it.
Right. Now, Rocky, are you familiar with Lawrence Lessig, Professor Lawrence Lessig's work?
I am, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Could you see yourself aligning or working with him? And then there's another, Dylan Ratigan has been on. He has something called Get Money Out. I think it's called the website is getmoneyout.org.
Yes.
But could you see yourself aligning with the likes of Lawrence Lessig and Dylan Ratigan, and then there's another organization, United Republic is the other one, unitedrepublic.org. Could you see yourself?
Well, Dylan Ratigan, actually, I think that I may be on his program later on in this week. So I'm really looking forward to that. We're just trying to finalize the travel plans, but we're totally aligned. And when sometimes he speaks with such rage, but it's so justified. Right. The way that we have to do something to shake things up in this country, and people are ready for it. This is such an amazing opportunity to turn all of this completely inside out and restore our democracy. And along with that, let me say also restoring the rule of law. We have this not only a two-tiered financial system where we have a greater economic disparity than at any time since the 1920s, and these people just having our way with us, with our government, with our future, but we also have a two-tiered system of justice. Glenn Greenwald wrote this fantastic book, With Liberty and Justice for Some. And I've been talking about this for years. I've done multimedia presentations. You can see those online. You can see them on the High Road for Human Rights website. And we see, for instance, the clearest example, more recent example was President Obama. When he talked during his campaign so reverently about the rule of law and all that, and then as soon as he comes into office, he says, about those war crimes. Violations of War Crimes Act of 1996, violation of the Federal Anti-Torture Statute, as well as, of course, violations of the Geneva Convention, the Convention Against Torture. But he said, about those, let's just look forward and not look backwards.
Yeah, I think his exact quote was, turn the page. It's time to turn the page.
But he also said, look forward and not backwards. Try that. Go out and shoplift a loaf of bread and try that defense to your judge and jury.
Right.
You know, how shameful. I mean, this man was a constitutional law professor, a president of the United States with the kind of base of support he had, and to come into office totally contrary to the principles of the Nuremberg Tribunal.
Right.
Where Justice Robert Jackson said about those principles being applied there, that these principles they're being applied against aggressor Germany today, but in the future they are to be applied to every nation, including those sitting in judgment here. I mean, how high-minded, how wonderful to think that we're going to have one fundamental standard on these issues, and then the complete reverse of that with the president that says about these major crimes, let's just look forward, not backwards. And by the way, he's also talking about the numerous felonies, thousands upon thousands of felonies committed under President Bush's illegal warrantless surveillance program.
Right.
But then, of course, what do we expect when it was President Obama, when he was in the United States Senate? Before he got the Democratic nomination, he promised that he would join a filibuster to block proposed legislation that would grant immunity for the telecommunication companies that cooperated with the Bush administration in that illegal surveillance program. And then as soon as he got the Democratic nomination, he betrayed that promise, turned 180 degrees, and actually voted to grant the immunity. Talk about corrupting influence of money. These telecom companies put $12 million in a 3-month period of time into their lobbyists in Washington. They put on the blitz, and they got Congress. Think about it. Got Congress to pass a bill giving them retroactive immunity for their numerous felonies that were committed in conjunction with the Bush surveillance program.
Absolutely. Rocky, on another issue of jobs, what would be your vision for how we could create jobs in this country, good paying jobs?
Well, first of all, we need a president and a Congress that is committed to this as a number one priority. We've got to put people back to work, and they've got to be good jobs, sustained jobs. And for the long term, of course, we're talking about education earlier.
Right.
If we don't have an educated workforce, if we're not competitive with other nations, those jobs are going to continue to be sucked out of our country.
Right.
But we should have a federal government program. Again, go back to FDR's time. People were out of work. He saw that we had a deteriorating infrastructure, that we needed to provide people with jobs and job experience and training. And he set up the WPA program, the CCC program. My high school in Ogden, Utah, it's gorgeous. And the detail in this building, it was a WPA project. They put a lot of people to work building these buildings, repairing bridges, roads, trails, and also in the culture, in the arts and culture area.
Right.
There were programs to put artists to work. These are investments that we cannot afford not to make. I mean, instead of paying unemployment and keeping people on the fringes, that's really a debilitating thing when you think about it, when there aren't folks out there getting good lifetime job skills and experience. And then, of course, our trade agreements have been shameful. When we've set the conditions for American businesses not to be able to compete unless they go to other nations to employ people there at much lower wages, sometimes almost slave wages, and not providing the same kinds of labor rights, not providing the same kind of environmental protections. And then with our healthcare system, there are a lot of businesses that simply can't afford to do business as usual because of the skyrocketing costs of healthcare. So much of this is interwoven that if we fix our healthcare system, if we renegotiate the trade agreements to provide for just essential labor rights and environmental protections, putting things on a more even kilter, making American businesses that employ people in the United States competitive, this is all going to make a tremendous difference. But we haven't seen that kind of commitment at all. These folks are just doing the bidding of the corporate sector so they can pay people less, sell more junk. I mean, look at what Walmart does, the way that the pressure that they put on the folks who sell them goods, just so they can keep the cost of the stuff that they sell low. And people are working in horrendous circumstances all around the world to keep the cost of those goods at the lowest possible level so that consumers will go to these Walmarts that are destroying businesses in our local communities. It's just amazing, this whole cycle. And we, the American people, stand by passively. And what's worse, we end up supporting it because you can save $1 or $2 when you go to Walmart over your local merchants.
Sure. Yeah, and we had a quick call from California, Ross, I think in Ventura. Ross, you there?
Yes. Hi. How you doing today, Darrell? Thanks for facilitating the show.
Okay.
And Mr. Anderson, great pleasure. Just want to
Thank
say
you,
thank you for giving us an alternative. Now, I don't expect you to tell me what it is right now, but I want you to think of something for the future. Since you're talking about the free trade agreements, I have 3 words. What's the plan? We hear a lot about it, but the thing is, my particular story, just very briefly, I'm a recording engineer. They got a guy conducting under a TV camera to Poland. They're paying an engineer $150 a week to record orchestra music for film. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. And then we're talking about the arts, even creating jobs in there. I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that. And but it's on every level. We need some sort of legislation to make it illegal to send any more jobs out of the country. I believe in a free trade agreement, but it's a little over the top now.
Right. Okay, Ross, thank you.
Well, one of the things we can do is provide incentives and disincentives. There ought to be a huge cost for American businesses to create all these jobs outside the country and destroy jobs here. But when the shareholders have to be served, and by the way, those who say that corporations are people don't know what they're talking about. Mitt Romney to say that. Mitt and I are old friends from the Olympics days, but it's absolutely ridiculous because people have hearts, people have souls, people care about a lot more than just simply maximizing profits. And the courts have made clear that corporations, their number one job is to maximize profits, and that's the fiduciary duty of the directors and the officers of a corporation. So they're going to be led down whatever course is going to take them to the greatest profits. And our government, it's our government that has facilitated this trail. We've cleared the way in just remarkable ways to undermine the working men and women of this country, to destroy jobs, and simply so that these corporations can go overseas and get cheaper labor. So we have to renegotiate those deals.
Oh, absolutely.
To make certain, as I said before, that put things on a more even keel. And at the same time, provide the opportunities in this country that where businesses will come over here and employ people and stay in the United States.
Right.
And as I said earlier, one of the things that's going to encourage corporations to do that is to revamp our healthcare system. I mean,
right.
the auto manufacturers almost went down the toilet in large part because of the cost of healthcare. Now, isn't that amazing? The corporate community in this country, except for the insurance industry, of course, and the pharmaceuticals, would get behind universal coverage and taking the for-profit insurance companies out of the equation when it comes to providing essential health care services.
Right.
There's no doubt in my mind that we can come together as a country to accomplish that. We know that physicians want it. We know that the consumers want it. I mean, the majority of people polled in this country were in favor of a single-payer health care system.
Right.
That means everybody in, nobody out, sort of a Medicare for all program, an improved Medicare for all program, and yet it never even saw the light of day. President Obama wouldn't talk about it. It never got on the table in Congress. And then even worse, as soon as there was any opposition voiced to the concept of a public option, President Obama gave up on that. He said, it's not essential for health care reform. Well, look at what we ended up with. We ended up with a so-called health care reform that is going to cost us all far more in premiums, that is going to lock in up to 20% of administrative costs, so-called, a lot of its profits, the marketing, the bonuses and everything, the shareholders' dividends for the private insurance companies. 20% of what we pay in that could be going to health care is now going to that waste.
Right.
So,
and then there's no limits on price increases.
Well, but there is a limit on how much so-called administratively. But you know what the average in the rest of the industrialized world is? It's right now it's running about 20% in the United States. It's about 3 to 5% in most other industrialized nations. Right. I urge everybody, take a look at T.R. Reid's book, The Healing of America. That's a great survey of what the rest of the industrialized countries, or the rest of the industrialized world is doing compared to the United States. It's fascinating reading and absolutely compelling in terms of the need for real reform in this country rather than what we got with Obamacare.
Right. Well, Rocky, we're just about out of time, and I wanted to say that you do some of your best work in speeches. Will you have some public speeches planned to talk about your campaign at some point soon?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of that's being worked out now, and I mean, I would like to do a major national tour and get out on the stump and have people hear our message and understand that there is a real option in this country, and we need to energize the American people in every way we can. I mean, I was talking about the role of a president, providing leadership and getting people on board. That's also the role of a serious candidate, and that's exactly what we plan to do. But we do need some help, and I urge everybody, please go to voterocky.org and join in this amazing grassroots movement.
Absolutely. Well, Rocky, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it and wish you the best of luck in your campaign.
Thank you so much, Daryl. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Okay, that was our guest, Mr. Rocky Anderson. We have completely run overtime a little bit, but we will thank him for his time, and I want to thank Marge, who helped us out with calls, and did such a great job today. So, and I want to thank everybody in the chat room at democracyinteractive.com. We invite you to join in, and during the week we're there in the evenings, and we'd love to have you join us and chat about whatever's on your mind. So thank you all again, and we're signing out for today. Thanks.